Welcome to Bucs Insider Live. Casey Phillips here with senior writer and editor Scott Smith, and we have a Week 1 win to talk about.
Yes.
Always our favorite on this show. And then we're going to, of course, look ahead to the Saints game. And if you have any questions for us, you can leave those underneath our Facebook Live video. We'll get to those in a minute. So, of course, as always, we just like to start with major takeaways from the game, which is always a more fun segment after a win, you know?
Yeah, it sure is. Obviously, that was a defensive-driven game, and it was a dominant defensive performance, and that's where you should begin when describing how the Buccaneers won that game. But honestly, the biggest takeaway for me was that the offensive line performed a lot better than probably a lot of people outside the building anticipated that it would. Now, to be clear, there was plenty of confidence in that line inside the building, and particularly Jason Light has been outspoken about how the Buccaneers have confidence, particularly in the two young guys, Robert Hainsey and Luke Gedeke, playing center and left guard. And we have talked, I think, on this show about how those guys were drafted to become starters. It was a third-round pick on Hainsey. They didn't know if they were going to be able to re-sign Ryan Jensen, so they anticipated him, taking over at some point. And when they drafted Luke Gedeke in the second round, they said, this guy's competing right now for the starting left guard job, which he won. The offensive line performed very well. They actually ran the ball extremely well. Leonard Fournette did, to the left side behind Luke Gedeke and Donovan Smith, and then Josh Wells, and tight ends over there as well. Both of the rookie tight ends did a great job blocking, according to the coaches, and it was just a really encouraging performance by those guys. And I had Luke Gedeke on our Salty Dogs podcast yesterday, and he was saying that it was a huge boost of confidence for him. And that's good. He's like, they feel a lot better moving forward. They got that first game in. It was against a pretty good defensive front, and they not only held their own, they kind of dominated at times. To me, that's the biggest takeaway from the game. And in a broader perspective, I think it shows that while this team has been passing attack driven with Tom Brady, the best passing attack in the league the last 2 years, and there's going to be some huge days for those guys, I have no doubt whatsoever, but this team might have a different formula some weeks for winning, and it's kind of harkens back to the old Buccaneer days of really good defense and a really good running game.
Yeah, and to know you can do that. And I agree with you about the confidence on the O-line. I mean, I think this game, it had all the elements of what you want to feel confident, that it's prime time and it's, the first game of the season, and it's a good defensive front, where it's one thing to just have a game under your belt. It's another for it to have all those different elements of under the bright lights in the big moment, that you can do that against a good defensive front. That you're right, that now it's like, oh, well, what else could be thrown at us? Although, again, this week, going to one of the loudest, hardest places, I do think it'll be a great test for not just their ability to play, but their communication.
It will be. It will be a good test, and we'll see if they can string some games like that together in a row. But, they also only allowed 2 sacks of Tom Brady, and that's one of the things that's been a really good harbinger for success for the Buccaneers since Tom Brady got here, when they have allowed 0 to 2 sacks in a game. Look at that, 23-2.
Wow.
So keeping the pressure off Tom Brady is paramount, and they did that.
I know Brady appreciates it too.
Yeah, and now they only committed 5 penalties. That's been good. They barely had positive points off of turnovers. It was 1 each, and we got a field goal, and they didn't, but still it counts.
Yep.
And then that run 21 plus times. Now, it is very true that is not always causative, right?
Yes.
The causal relationship.
Winning, so you run. Right.
But I didn't choose 30 plus runs. I chose 21, which is not a ton. I mean, that's a normal number, so you can get there without it being game specific. You can run 20, 21 times in a game, whether you're ahead or behind or whatever. Right. 14-3. So, listen, if the Buccaneers can do this, I'm not saying it's going to happen every week. I'm just saying we might win some games in a different way than we've been used to seeing the last couple of years.
Yeah, and I know I asked Todd Bowles about that on our radio show is this a game plan that is the Todd Bowles ideal game plan? And he said, no, the Todd Bowles ideal game plan is what the game decides it should be.
Yeah.
Which I think it speaks to it either way, that it's there is not going to be one formula, but now the team knows that whether it is the deep ball passes, it is a pass-heavy game like Week 1 of last year, where Brady's throwing 50 times, or it's this way. I think that
it's the same team. So.
And it's so we know that whatever it can be done in any way, and that's what Bowles really seems to be, harping on, is that look, we're not just going to say this is what we do no matter what. Each game could be different, and now we know we can do it a bunch of different ways.
And the key there is that if you have to do it that way, you're capable of doing so.
which is going to be great. And so now I know another area that doesn't always get the love, doesn't always get the attention, but was a storyline coming out of the preseason was the special teams. That there were some games in the preseason where the performance, whether it was the coverage or missing a couple field goals or whatever it might be, wasn't what the team was hoping for. Even the return game, all of that. So what were the things that you felt like you saw week one from the special teams front, coverage, return, actual kicking?
Well, it's not just the preseason. It dates back to last year where there were some areas of the special teams that were not up to what the standard of what the team wanted. And in a game, especially in games like against the Saints, it was common that they would have a special teams edge because they would kick and they would cover better than we would. And in the special teams, there were some coverage issues and some long returns. But Todd Bowles explained that they were having Jake Camarda just blasted as far as he could. So they were trying specifically not to get fair catches because they wanted to evaluate a bunch of cover guys.
Right.
And they did, and it was a lot of guys, and not all of them are on the team right now. And so it really isn't what we're doing now. The special teams in that game in Dallas probably wasn't the winning edge because the defense was so dominant. We won by 16 points. But if that game had been close, special teams might have been the edge right there. Ryan Suckup made 4 of his 5 field goals. Jake Camarda blasted a 65-yarder. He hit 1 off the scoreboard that didn't count. But overall, his other 2 punts were, one was fair caught for like a 40-something yard net, and one was returned for 3 yards, and they have a really dangerous return man. So there were some numbers coming out of that game, like the kickoff drive start for the Cowboys, like where they started after the kickoffs on average, was 18.8 yards, and that was the best in the league. That was a lot better than what the Buccaneers were getting last year. So, here's some of it right there. The kickoff drive start first, average, actually, I made a mistake there. That punt drive start was not first, it was 5th, but still pretty good. Sorry about the typo there. But gross punting average, net punting average, and Cade Otton. 3 tackles. He was blowing people up on special teams, and KJ Britt also had 2 tackles. So there were a lot of nice performances on special teams, and it came together into what could have been a winning edge had it been a really close game.
That is amazing to see with Cade, because as we talked about his contributions to this team, I don't think we mentioned special teams.
I don't think I was thinking about it
at any point. Yeah, I don't believe we thought that was going to be where he could make some of his biggest contributions. So that's just icing on the cake.
And hey, before the game on the radio, Jason Light was talking about all the rookies that were going to make an impact. And this is a very veteran team. We have like 15 guys who are 30 or older. But Cade Otton, awesome on special teams, very good blocking. Jake Camarda, Luke Gedeke had a great game. Rashad White didn't get to play a ton, but he looked pretty good when he did. I'm probably forgetting somebody, but I mean.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different. Cokeith was in there for a bit.
Cokeith blocked really well early on.
They all got in there. That's going to be so interesting. Well, how about we take a look now at the Saints game, and what are some of the biggest things that we know? This is a team we know very well. So this team this year, new head coach, a few new pieces. What is going to be, in your mind, similar or different to the other matchups that, and especially what we hope will be different, is a win as compared to the last 7 regular season matchups.
But not the playoffs.
Not the playoffs. We're
I'll segue into this by saying, have you seen our injury report this week?
Yeah, I was trying to forget the injury report.
I think they should have just put offense questionable, right?
Entire offense.
5 receivers.
I think you and I are going to get called on potentially.
5 of the 7 receivers are on the injury report for the Bucs. The reason I bring that up, not to bring this whole
Debbie
show
Downer.
down, right? Is that the Saints have a new look receiving core, and it's something that has me a little bit concerned in this matchup. Michael Thomas has missed most of the last 2 years. I think he's played 7 games. He's back, and it was sort of a question mark. Is he fully healthy coming into the season? Well, he scored 2 touchdowns. They signed Jarvis Landry kind of late in the offseason after the draft. You see the day that he had. And most of this was like in the 4th quarter, by the way, because they couldn't get their passing game going for the whole first half.
Right.
And then Chris Olave is the guy that took him 11th overall, but that was after several trades. So the amount of draft capital they poured into getting Chris Olave was actually pretty huge. This is what they have now. Last year it was no Michael Thomas. It was a bunch of guys that you had barely heard of, and they sunk to actually the worst passing attack in the league.
Wow.
32nd in passing yards. I think they're looking a lot different. Jameis Winston is back. He's healthy, and he's leading that band there. And they have a trio of receivers that is going to test our guys. Now, our guys did a great job in coverage in the Dallas game, but Dallas had CeeDee Lamb and then a bunch of guys that you haven't basically heard of. It'll be a bigger test now. Carlton Davis and Jamel Dean were great in coverage. Antoine Winfield did really well in the slot, and I think I know they're up for the challenge, but it is a bigger challenge this week.
Yeah, so speaking of that, we do have a Facebook question here. Kyle wanted to know, why did Sean Murphy-Bunting not get more time in the secondary?
Well, he didn't get any, actually.
Yes, yeah, well, he kind of put that as trying to make it sound a little bit nicer.
Okay, well, because Jamel Dean won the starting job, Antoine Winfield was in the slot, and before we had three corners playing a lot because you're in nickel a lot, and the third corner was on the field. With Antoine Winfield getting all the slot snaps in this game, there just wasn't a package that they needed Sean for. But Coach Bowles has said they did have some other things that would have involved Sean and maybe even Keanu Neal, who also didn't play on defense. They just didn't get to them because of what the Cowboys were doing, and what the Bucs were doing was working. I mean, I think that's the key right there. Now, we know we have a very good player in Sean Murphy-Bunting available to play, and he didn't get a chance in this game, but in this particular game, what they were doing was working, and if it is, you stick with it, right?
You stick with it, yeah, and we were talking about the wide receiver injuries here. Chad wanted to know, now that Chris Godwin is out for a couple weeks, would Julio be that number 2, then Gage, then Perriman, or what do you see as the order there, and also depending on the different injury situations, how this could look?
I think I'll answer the question under the assumption that everybody's healthy, and I don't think that's actually a valid assumption, because I doubt that all 5 of those guys on the injury report are going to be fine for this game. But in terms of health, if Chris Godwin wasn't there and everybody else was available, I think Julio Jones is probably your second outside guy, along with Mike Evans, and Russell Gage is your primary slot guy. Now, maybe in just a 2-receiver set, it's probably a mixture of Russell Gage and Julio Jones,
right.
But if you have 3 on the field, which you do, usually more than 50% of the snaps, it's probably Mike and Julio on the outside and Russell Gage in the slot.
Okay, and then Richard asked, what is going on with Kyle Rudolph that he was not active? I thought he would be a good blocker.
Well, I mean, he probably would be, but the Buccaneers have been very happy with the way that Cade Otton and Ko Kieft in particular have been blocking, and both those guys did prove good in that regard in that game. But Coach Bowles said yesterday that the difference was special teams, and
Which
they thought
we saw the Cade Otton stats there.
I mean, if you didn't have Cade Otton on those coverage units, it might have been worse, right? So both those guys contributed on special teams, and they didn't really have a role for Kyle on special teams. And part of the thing here is, A, you're keeping up 6 receivers, and B, you got to name 6 guys inactive, right? There isn't a whole lot of chaff on that defensive side. You have 4 corners because Zion McCollum's out. You got 4 safeties. You got 4 outside linebackers plus 1 you elevated in Jannard Avery. You got 4 inside linebackers. And just, you look and go, where are we going to find an inactive from? And you mostly have to take from offense. So we notably only kept 3 backs and 3 tight ends active, and they felt with the special teams contributions that Cade and Kyle would make, it made more sense to keep them up.
Okay, and then we will close with this one. Christopher said, are the Bucs looking to sign another offensive lineman since the Donovan Smith injury?
Oh, no, I don't think so. I don't think this is a long-term thing at all. We know how tough Donovan is, right? They called this Coach called it a pain tolerance issue. Now, if he doesn't play, I don't want it to sound like we're calling out his toughness. He's extremely tough. He's missed 1 game since he was drafted in 2015, and we know at times he's played through injuries to make that happen. So if there's a player who can get through a pain tolerance issue, it's Donovan Smith.
Yeah.
Now, it could just be too bad that he can't play. We'll see later in the week, but I don't think this is a long-term thing, so I doubt they'll sign anybody. All
right, well, that's going to do it for us on this edition of Bucs Insider Live. Thanks, as always, for joining us, and we'll be back here next week, so make sure you send in your questions then.